Carytown Concert House in Ann Arbor is well known for its innovative programming, and this weekend, in fact, they have an innovative opera that they're putting on. It's called As One, an opera about the transgender experience. This is music of Laura Kaminsky, and the libretto by Mark Campbell and Kimberly Reed, and we are joined in the studio right now for a little classical conversation about this production. It's a really interesting opera. We're joined by soprano Jennifer Cresswell. Full disclosure, you are my wife, Jennifer.
It's true.
You are performing the one of the leading roles, one of two leading roles in this opera, which are really the same person, and we'll get into that momentarily. But I also want to welcome Kathy Kelly, who is artistic administrator of Carytown Concert House, and you are also the director of this production.
The vocal coach and the stage director is how they're crediting me. So.
Yeah. So you wore a few different hats during this production.
I have, yeah. There are a lot of hats in my life right now.
Well, that's good. That's good. Let's talk about As One. This is an opera that was composed premiered, I believe, in 2014. Was developed under the auspices of American Opera Projects in New York. And since the time of the premiere, it's been done by many, many different opera companies. Yeah. It's really one of the most performed, if not the most performed modern opera going right now.
Not only that, but it was the 14th most frequently produced opera in North America last year, which is just absolutely remarkable for a piece so new.
That puts it above, many beloved operas from the standard repertoire.
Absolutely.
As well. Well, let's talk about As One, and Jenny, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the whole idea behind the opera. We say it's about the transgender experience, but it's about much more than that. The transgender experience is sort of the framework for bringing out all of these different experiences that everybody experiences.
Absolutely. This opera, the framework is that of a transgendered person. And I'm very fortunate to be joined by Jonathan Lash, who's a bass baritone and plays Hannah before. And then I have been given the task of playing Hannah after. But the truth is there's not a hard switch where he starts out in the beginning of the show and then I end up only in the second half. We're both on stage for most of the entire opera, so you really get that inner dialogue. And in that regard, the entire opera is just about self-discovery and acceptance. It starts out in childhood and goes back to grade school and then goes right through puberty and college and adulthood and everything that really happens on that journey where people just learn to accept themselves.
Yeah, it has a bit of a stylized feel to it in the sense that you've got these 15 different little scenes or songs or arias that are, and in some cases, very mundane experiences that mean a lot to the characters, like towards the end of the opera when somebody walks past you and says, "Hello, ma'am," or something like that, and for you, that's like a zenith experience.
That actually takes place in the second section. It's before the complete transition has happened, but Hannah has gone off to college and goes across the bridge to San Francisco and is starting to experiment with dressing as a woman in public. And someone says, "Pardon me, miss," after they run into her, and just those three little words shake her to her core. And she has this moment of realization, like, I am doing this now. I'm doing this out in the world. It's not just inside of me anymore.
Yeah. Well, I was close with what I was thinking. In productions that I have seen of As One, in YouTube clips and so on, the two characters sort of shadow each other. There's a sort of a dance that's going on between them. I'm wondering, Kathy, if you can talk about this production in particular, what the approach was to having these characters relate to each other on stage.
Right. This is a good time for me to mention the major musical collaborator here, in addition to the singers that Jennifer has already mentioned. Kevin Fitzgerald is the music director of the Apex Chamber Ensemble, and they were the people who originally approached us with this project in mind. Carytown is, thank you for mentioning our eclectic and interesting programming, but opera is not the sort of thing that you think about at the Carytown Concert House. We're a venue for art song and jazz and chamber music, But the forces for this piece are really intimate, 2 singers and a string quartet, right? So it is something that fits the size of our house. And as you mentioned, the piece is constructed of 15 essentially songs, like solos and duets. And so it's on a very intimate scale. So we were interested in playing with a space that's really opening up in classical vocal performance right now, where somebody like Ian Bostridge has done this magnificent staged Winterreise, and American Opera Projects is producing so many pieces that start as sort of small lab projects and sometimes get bigger and sometimes don't. People are interested in writing pieces that can go into many different sized venues and not necessarily just proscenium theaters, all as a part of trying to reach out and broaden to audiences that maybe haven't made it into the concert hall. So that's why we're doing this in the concert house. To go back to your question, with the 2 people shadowing each other, there's not much choice in our small venue to do anything but. They're really like next to each other and on top of each other for the whole performance. Yeah. And that's right, because they're the same person. So it's like looking in a mirror.
Well, for the weekend, we'll call it the Carytown Opera House.
The Carytown Opera House, yes. Yeah. KOH. It works.
You can find more information, by the way, if you check out their website, Carytown, that's Kerry, town, concerthouse.com. There's also a phone number. And tell me if this is wrong, Kathy, but I believe I have the number here, 734-769-2999. Does that sound right to you?
It does.
Good. We're talking with Kathleen Kelly, who is artistic director, also the music director, the vocal coach of the opera, the stage director and vocal coach of the opera As One. Music by Laura Kaminsky, libretto by Mark Campbell and Kimberly Reed. Well, let's listen to an excerpt from the opera itself. This is one of those songs that we were talking about. It's entitled To Know. This is an audio clip that comes from American Opera Projects, which actually developed the work. The original cast here, mezzo Sasha Cook, performing along with the Fry Street Quartet. Jenny, can you introduce this for us?
Absolutely. So To Know happens, and Hannah After sings most of it. Right after Hannah Before, played by Jonathan Lash in our production, has sung 2 pieces, the one directly prior being Perfect Boy, where in high school he's talking about everything that he needs to do to cover up these feelings and this part of him who eventually will become her. And he's talking about being class president and honor roll and captain of the football team and all these great things. And that is all an effort to suppress the feminine that is also inside Hannah. And then To Know begins. And it is my character, Hannah After, who rises back up and sees on television someone who says the word transgender. And she doesn't know what that means. And so she sneaks off to the library back in the days of the old card catalog, and she's thumbing through all of the cards and all of these words that start with trans anything, and then she arrives at transgender. And all she wants is information. The information is such a comfort to her, but she doesn't want anyone to know. So she sticks it and hides the book that she is reading inside another book that ends up being on the Transvaal War. So everyone thinks that she's doing this research on the Transvaal War, and really she keeps hiding all of the books on transgender to educate herself.
Wow. Music of Laura Kaminsky here on FM 91.
When I see her on TV, there she is, and I hear the word to the world. It might look like I'm becoming an expert on the Transvaal War.
That's an excerpt from the opera As One, music of Laura Kaminsky, libretto by Mark Campbell and Kimberly Reed. We heard a performance from the mezzo Sasha Cook, performing with the Fry Street Quartet. You can find that on the on the American Opera Project's website. You can also find it on Opera America, I believe, but
I think so.
American Opera Projects at aopopera.org/as1. A lot of other information there as well about the opera. Jennifer Cresswell is here, soprano, who is portraying that role of Hannah After in Kaminsky's opera. And that is tomorrow evening and Saturday evening at 8 o'clock p.m. at Carytown Concert House. More information at carytownconcerthouse.com or 734-769-2999. Very dramatic, very intimate music.
Dramatic and intimate, and with all voices having a very soloistic quality. Laura has been around. She arrived in Ann Arbor yesterday and was at our rehearsal. Absolutely delightful and kind.
This is the composer.
Woman. Yes, the composer. I mean, just creates such a beautiful atmosphere for working. And she was talking about the sort of rhythmic integrity and the soloistic integrity of different lines. She spent a lot of time in Africa, I guess, so is very interested in rhythm and less interested in downbeats. So that has been very informative to us.
It has to be interesting to work with a living composer. Because,
totally.
In the world of opera, as we know, that is not often the case.
Right.
And sometimes they come to you and their ideas are completely out of the box compared to what you were thinking and bringing into it.
Well, and it just illustrates every single time I have the chance to do it. I've been so lucky this year. At the University of Michigan, we did William Bolcom's latest opera, Dinner at 8. Totally different animal because he's kind of writing very purposefully in a style that evokes the 1930s and all of that Broadway and all of that jazz. But he was also around for a big part of our rehearsal process. Every time I get the chance to liaise with a living composer, I realize how much of their language is theirs. And no matter how good we can get at notating things and recording things, there's no substitute for being with that person and their energy, and to be around as they, with their voice and their gestures and everything, are articulating what their musical vision is.
Yeah. Jenny, you want to talk a little bit from the singer's experience, the singer's perspective, working with a living composer? I mean, is that something that you thrive on, or is it a little bit scary to have them in the rehearsal process?
I don't think scary is the right word, just because Laura Kaminsky was very open and so generous yesterday. And she even gave us comments afterwards, and we all kind of sat on the floor together and went through things. So I don't think scary is the right word. I do think, as someone who has sung a lot of older opera, where there is a strong tradition of how things are usually done, and maybe the meter is a bit more rigid, there were challenges. And then to hear Laura speak yesterday about her time in Africa and how she wants to get away from the idea of a downbeat because it's all just beats over and over. I think when I was able to combine that revelation that she shared with the idea of just the English language, and that's another thing about this opera, is that it's in English, right? So combining those two ideas and just getting that text to flow in a way that makes sense, because it's not always necessarily the way that a singer is used to seeing it, with certain syllables stressing on downbeats and that sort of thing. But once you get away from the idea of a downbeat and that everything is just a beat that you're trying to work with, that was a big help to me.
We talked in the beginning about how popular this opera has been with opera companies. It seems to have a great deal of resonance in today's contemporary life. But we also were talking about the fact that, this opera, as opposed to being some sort of an activist statement, really is kind of a gateway to the human experience, maybe through different eyes. And that's often what these operas, what any opera is about, is living through somebody else's experience and maybe learning something as well.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, another thing that Laura said yesterday when we were talking was that she wanted to tell a human story through a specific point of view. So the story of this specific human, Hannah, which is very much based on the experiences of one of the co-librettists, Kimberly Reed. That experience is specific, and it's not watered down. It's, the fact that this person is a person who goes on a journey and is a transgendered person is not incidental to the story. It is the story.
Right.
And yet, Kimberly and Mark, the two librettists, and Laura have made sure to structure the story and tell it in a way that opens the door for anyone who listens to realize, oh, the story of that specific human over there, who might seem really different than me in some ways, is also my experience. I also had to figure out who I was in the world, and I also know what it's like to run into societal expectations or structures that I do or don't measure up to, and to decide what that means about me. And in the end, I just have to figure out in my own head who I am. I mean, and you end up at the end with that great feeling of union. I mean, that it happens with the Marriage of Figaro too, right? I think the great works in our canon are the ones that have opened that door to the great human channel that we all share.
Yeah. This opera, how long is the opera?
75 minutes.
75 minutes, yeah.
Shorter than a movie.
Just but a perfect amount of time for contemporary audiences, I think, to spend. I imagine that this opera is going to draw not just, the opera crowd, but also the theater crowd.
We've already had so much commentary about it. It's one of the reasons we decided to jump on it. Because, we're not an opera-producing organization, right? And neither is Apex Chamber Ensemble. And yet we realized that we could do it. And people are hungry to hear this piece. We have a group of 12 kids who are at the Interlochen boarding school who are coming down with their teachers to hear it on Saturday night. And that was instigated by the students.
Wow.
When they found out there was a Michigan performance happening, they approached their teachers and said, we've heard about this opera. We really want to hear it. That story is important to us and has meaning.
That's remarkable.
I had somebody approach me on the street in Ann Arbor and say, I hear you're doing this. I have a transgendered son. We can't wait to be there this weekend. Representation is important. Representation of our stories up where people can see and hear them. It's important. And opera has a lot of catching up to do in that regard. So,
well, it's safe to say, Hannah, the character of the opera, is certainly a sympathetic character, but also a very brave soul, and somebody who goes on a journey that can be an inspiration to so many. And not just on the transgender front, Jenny. You mentioned while we were listening to the music, this is a female character in opera who is not portrayed in terms of her romantic involvement,
It's true. She's not out to scorn anyone or win anyone back or seduce anyone. She just gets to be a person.
That sets her apart from all the other sort of stock opera characters.
Right. Certainly anyone I've ever played.
Yeah.
Well, are you familiar with the Bechdel test for movies?
I don't ask me to explain it, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, so the test is there any conversation between two women ever in the movie that isn't about a man?
Wow.
So not very many Hollywood movies pass that test, and I think very few operas pass that test.
Yeah.
But As One definitely does.
Well, the opera is happening tomorrow night, Friday, and Saturday evening, both performances at 8 o'clock p.m. This is happening in Ann Arbor at Carytown Concert House. Their website is carytownconcerthouse.com. You can call them if you like, 734-769-2999. What was Kimberly Reed's involvement in this opera? Kimberly Reed, known for her film Prodigal Sons, I believe. Right. She's made a few other films as well. Right. She is a transgendered artist herself. What was her input into the libretto of this? She
is responsible for major components of the work. She's the co-librettist along with Mark Campbell, and many of the details in the libretto are drawn from her life.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. So there's you end up in the first part of the piece with a picture of a very popular and overachieving young high school man, like on the football team and on the honor roll and just trying to do everything right.
Well, and if you've seen that documentary or that film of hers about her experience,
exactly,
that was her in high school.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
She also created the video imagery that's part of the production.
Okay.
Which Carytown is able to do in a less overwhelming way than some other theaters.
Well, no, we say more intimate way.
It is more intimate, but the video imagery is very beautiful and evocative and a very big part of the storytelling. So, and it's very impressive the way that Laura and Mark and Kimberly are a real triumvirate in terms of driving the performance of this piece around the country. They're a very solid trio, and also a real example of how creative teams are sticking together and working as teams beyond the point of creation of a piece.
Yeah,
it's very impressive.
Now, you would think like there are not nearly as many forces, not as many wheels in motion here as you find in a typical opera.
Right.
You've got a couple of singers, and you have a quartet, a string quartet.
Yeah.
But from what I've seen of it, it seems like this is a difficult score to pull off effectively. Is it not? Jenny, you want to talk about that a little bit? I mean, I'm sure you're doing a fantastic job of it. But it seems like there's a lot of, the smaller the forces, the more complicated and difficult it can be to make it all work the way you want it to.
Right. Well, I think some of the challenges that have presented in this that are different maybe from some other roles that I've done have to do with, the idea of getting rid of a sense of downbeat in many instances. That has certainly been a challenge. We just started working with the quartet on Monday. We had our Sitzprobe and
the string quartet.
The string quartet, yes, and that is always like an experience of exploration and feeling each other out when you're used to doing a role with just piano and regular rehearsals, and then you move in with the strings, or in many cases an orchestra. I also think just the idea of stamina. I mean, it's 75 minutes. Which many operas are longer than that. However, I never leave the stage from the very beginning until the opera is over. So in many ways, it is longer than any role that I've ever sung, even though the opera itself is shorter. And it's also just mental stamina.
Yeah.
In addition to, the vocal singing, also the way that it's set up is almost like a song cycle. It is in 15 pieces, but there's not really room for an audience to applaud after an aria or a duet or anything like that.
You don't get a break.
I don't think so.
And neither does the quartet. I mean, they're playing all the time, and there's no kind of hanging back and being part of a section. You have to be on it all the time.
You're not like the cymbal player just waiting for your cue.
right.
No,
they're working. Yeah. They're doing a great job.
So, I mean, realistically speaking, as far as the singing goes and the playing goes, this requires more endurance than a Wagner opera or something like that.
I'd compare it. I'd compare it to a big role. I mean, when you think that, that you're on stage for 75 minutes. That's more time than Wotan in Das Rheingold, for example.
Yeah. Well, should you ever sing Wotan, Jenny, you'll be well prepared.
I'm feeling it this morning. It's a possibility.
Be the transgender Rheingold.
Well, we may be onto something here. But you can always take Birgit Nielsen's advice and just wear comfortable shoes. She said that was the most important thing about it.
And we certainly are in this production. We have matching tennis shoes, so we should be good to go.
Excellent. Well, the point of bringing all that up is that it's a display not only of this remarkable story and the context in which it's given, but also a remarkable display of the things that we love about opera. That is the virtuosity of singing and playing and performing and having it done basically at Carytown. If you have not been there, everything is right in your face. I mean, you're not that far away from the stage.
Exactly. We seat 110 people. According to Laura, it is. I think we are the smallest venue to have done as one, but not by much. It also got done in Berlin in a space that was very tiny, maybe 10 or 15 seats. larger than us. And part of what's so sly about the piece is that with these forces, I love that it combines small forces with actual, like, classically trained singers, because you get all of the color and dynamic variation and, like, emotional information of those voices. But we're not in a giant theater, so you all don't have to sing at the edge of your resources, to be over the orchestra. Like, balance isn't a thing, that's so the singers have got every bit of range that they want to use, from very loud to very soft. It's totally up to them. They don't have to work to make the text understood.
Right.
So that is more like an immediate theater experience. So people who already love classical music and already love opera will find everything that they love there. But people who have not necessarily connected with that kind of experience, who love theater, who love immediacy in other ways, will also be able to find what they love in this experience. So it's very smart.
Yeah, you mentioned the text and understandability, and looking over the libretto, it's very poetic, but it's also very straightforward and kind of in your face. Yeah. This is what happened. Right. Yeah.
Mark is fantastic at that. The way that he can take a big experience, distill it down to a very small number of words that are still totally clear, but also very beautiful, like on their own. Yeah.
Which leaves room for the music.
There's a reason that everybody's commissioning him to write libretti right now. It's because he's really, really good at it.
Well, the opera is called As One, an opera about the transgender experience. It is happening tomorrow evening, Friday night, and Saturday evening at 8 o'clock p.m. This is in Ann Arbor at Carytown Concert House. More information at carytownconcerthouse.com. or 734-769-2999. Is there anything else that the two of you would like to let our listeners know about before we listen to a little bit more music by Laura Kaminsky?
I would say from my end, just if you are not used to going to operas or you don't know what to expect, but you do love theater and you do love storytelling, then you should come out and experience this, because I think it's a great gateway to just classical music and opera in general. I think people will be very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, and also Stand Alone is a remarkable work of theater as well. So it's sort of, crosses the fence here with lots of different audiences. Yeah. And typically, you've got people spilling out into the street. So if they want their tickets, they better
That's right.
get them soon.
That's right. We're selling really well, but there's room still to come on both nights. And I want you to come meet Hannah. She's remarkable. She's brave, as you said, and she's also kind of goofy, especially as she's a kid. And she's fabulous.
Wonderful. The opera As One at Carytown Concert House tomorrow evening, Saturday evening at 8 o'clock, carytownconcerthouse.com or 734-769-2999. My thanks to soprano Jennifer Cresswell, who portrays the role of Hannah After. Also to Kathleen Kelly, artistic director of Carytown Concert House, and also the stage director and vocal coach for this production. Thanks to both of you for joining us here on FM 91.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.